Yeah, front page New York Times, above the fold, as they say. Big article on single motherhood. Sets up, I read it last night and gave it to Miss Bennett to read. Sets up two women who work together at a daycare center. And they're often mistaken for each other, but their lives are very, very different. One mom has 3 kids and is single. The other mom has got 2 or 3 or 4 kids and is married. And the marriage gap. And the marriage gap is not just a gap in elections, where Romney is strongly favored by people who are married, including women who are married, and overcomes part of that gender gap otherwise noted. But just how difficult life is. Well, the one woman, the single mom, makes $25,000 a year. The mom and the dad, mom was married, they make $75,000 a year. They have time for their kids. They have much more time to do things, scouting, all sorts of stuff. And the single mom has to scramble. She dropped out of college and had babies before she got married, never did get married. What's the Brookings Institution say? What's the moral of the story? Finish school, get a job, get married before you have children. And anyway, the New York Times piece is very good. The two-parent family, this is from the piece, and then we'll get Paul to comment, has a profound advantage in income and nurturing time. Makes their children statistically more likely to finish college, find good jobs, and form stable marriages themselves. Marriage decline compounds economic woes since it leaves the needy to struggle alone. As you know, audience, my parents were divorced. My mother was married several times. But she was married before she had children, and that makes a difference. This situation described in the New York Times is different from that. Christopher Jenks, who started a lot of this a long time ago, he must be 100 years old. He was at Harvard when I was there. The people who need to stick together for economic reasons don't. And the people who least need to stick together do. People who need some lift. Back to Charles Murray. Growing up in Fishtown, you need some lift. It would be good. Remember the woman who called and said it used to be the case that lots of nurses from relatively modest backgrounds would go into nursing and hospitals and marry doctors. She said that's less and less the case now. I haven't seen statistics on it. She said doctors now marrying other doctors. And that's what this means. The people who least need to stick together do. So you have two highly professional, high-earning people, or moderately successful middle-class people marrying each other. If one of those people married someone else who needed a lift, you could lift that person. But what happens is the people who are already rising up marry other people who are rising up. But look at these trends. As recently as 1990, 10% of the births to white women with some post-secondary schooling occurred outside marriage. Now it's tripled to 30%. Scott Winship of Brookings examined the class trajectories of 2,400 Americans. Among those raised in the poorest third as teenagers, 58% who lived with two parents moved up to a higher level as adults, as compared to 44% with an absent parents. Winship interprets his own results cautiously. Even if marriage helped the people who got married, he warns, it might hurt other families if it tied women to troubled men. Quote, you get back to the question of how many marriageable men there are. This goes back to the Book of Man, if I may. So this is a very important piece in the New York Times. It's rather like the piece that they did on teaching, where they pointed out how much difference good teachers made. Best quote from the article, according to our David, is this: whether measured by Legos or marriage rates, the pattern is similar. The middle is shifting toward the bottom. We're losing the middle class. This is what Charles Murray means by coming apart. That's the summary as I saw it, but I'm going to let astute Paul from Delaware, Newcastle, comment. Paul, did you want to add anything to that analysis?
The one thing I wanted to say was that it sort of reminds me of the HPV serum vaccine. All of a sudden comes out, and all of a sudden it's worth doing something about the HPV infections that eventually may cause cancer in women. But it was never worth them saying, change your behavior to avoid this cancer.
Yeah, right. No, when is it appropriate to say change your behavior? Never. According to the commentary section, you're saying in the New York Times, right?
Any change in any attempt to change people's behavior would be fascism.